Before we get to the show, I want to let you know about the Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop, now taking registrations. If you sometimes struggle to find good deer, sometimes struggle to seal the deal, or are a good hunter already but need those critical last few pieces of the puzzle, our workshop's for you. This 2-day experience gives hunters the tools and mindsets needed to be consistent on the best deer where they hunt. Sign up below for a whitetail educational experience you won't forget. The Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop. And now, let's get to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're wrapping up our series on land and food strategies, how to best set up your land for whitetail success. In this episode, I'm with Rich Chrzan of Killer Food Plots, talking about food, how to properly prepare and set up food plots for maximum draw. If you have haphazard success putting in plots, many of us have, and getting them to produce well year after year, or are just starting and want to make sure you do it correctly, this is the podcast for you. And we have a free journal you can download to follow along with this episode and all our other ones that will really help absorb all this high IQ info. Okay, here are the top things to look for during this episode. What are key considerations to check and make sure you have spot on for highly attractive food plots? What's the blueprint according to Rich, or the core foundation for having a great food plot? What are critical time considerations for balancing soil pH, nutrients, and also planning to get optimal results? Why is organic matter important for fixing or building up poor soils like sand or soils that just won't produce? What is many times overlooked regarding where you plant regarding sunlight for certain seed types? And what does Rich say you have to be very careful about when using herbicides? And there's a ton more in there as usual, so let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. All right, I'm here with Rich Chrzan with Killer Food Plots. Rich, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're in this series looking at land and food plot strategies. And if you hear this when it first comes out, it's that time of year where people are getting in food plots. Maybe they already did a little bit, but it's that time of year. And so I want to talk to Rich here. Why I brought him on was to really get into some details. We're going to start kind of basic, but we're going to peel the onion back, so to say, all the layers of really establishing correct, good food plots that really attract and draw deer. We all can probably put in food plots and have, I know I have, that are, they're decent, right? They kind of work. Sometimes they, ultimately fail or don't do that well. So we want to get into the nitty gritty of that. Before we do though, Rich, curious to know, we met at shows and things, talked quite a bit this past year at different shows. But for people that don't know you, aren't aware of Killer Food Plots, just tell us a bit about your background and, kind of where you're at and how you came to be where you are here with the food plot stuff.
So I started food plots as kind of a hobby years ago. We bought some property and decided that I was going to do some off-the-shelf stuff. And, I did, and I was successful the first year and failed the second year and, on. And that was back and forth for quite a few years. And moving forward, a buddy of mine, we started hunting together, and he just decided to take the food plot thing to a new level. He actually established Killer Food Plots back in early 2000s, licensed it at 2012. And we, kind of separated our ways, and he kept trying to get me to come and work for him. He wanted me to do the food plot thing with him. And long story short, I went and worked with him for a few years, and he unfortunately passed away. And we acquired the company from his family. And that's why we are Killer Food Plots today. Me and my wife run it. So the history is, it was a hobby, turned into my buddy's passion. And then, I got back into it with him, and it became my passion. I was a maintenance guy originally, so that helps out because farming is breaking. So, if you're going to break stuff, you might as well be able to fix it too. But, um, so yeah, that's where we are. We're a full service. We install food plots, have seed. I like to educate people a lot on doing them. A lot of people want to do them themselves. I think that's terrific. It can be a great family thing to do. Get the young kids out there in the woods and get them out there and get them invested. So um, it's just where we're at now is moving forward with seed lines and mostly the installs. And I like to do things like this, like talking to you and educating people on because there's various steps. There's a lot of things you can do in a food plot, just small little things that can make or break the thing. And it only takes that 1 mil misstep, like you said, to be
Right.
bumming. You spend all that money and now all of a sudden you don't have any good results. So for doing food plots is definitely one of the measurables. You can see how you're doing.
Right. Yeah. And, Nick, he was an acquaintance of mine. I didn't know him real well, but the former owner you talked about and your friend there, I mean, he was fanatical about it. So a lot of this stuff is, that he developed through his years of hard work. So, yeah, establishing good food sources is really key on private property. And about 90%, if you look generally in the Midwest, of deer are taken on private land. So establishing one of the things, it's not the only thing, but good food sources is key, especially with high competition out there, neighbor against neighbor, competing for the same deer, really, most of the
Yeah.
time, right? So let's get in here. The first question I have is really, what are key considerations and strategies for establishing a proper food plot, a good food plot, as we talk, one that's highly attractive, that versus, kind of those food plots that are okay, or that maybe fail? What are some key things to getting those established properly?
You know, you got to have the proper conditions. Mother Nature's always the one that is going to go get you. But you need your soil prep. Your soil needs to have the nutrients to give back to that plant, so that plant give the nutrients back to the deer. So soil samples are very key. Locations, how much sunlight are you getting? Are you on a field edge? What is your neighbor planting? Like you said, you're in competition with your neighbor. You want to kind of get something that nobody has, right? I mean, if in my area we're ag, so there's corn and beans and hay fields. You can stand on my deck and shoot a bow and probably hit any one of those. So, you want to put something out there that they don't have in the area. Maybe some brassicas. If clover's not real abundant out there, do some clovers. Um, but establishing your soil and getting that corrected to be able to grow the right plant and give it all the nutrients it needs to give back to the deer is really the important part. You want to keep your deer healthy. We're all out there trying to get those big bucks, right? I mean, that's the goal. It's great to see deer, but if you don't keep them deer healthy all year long, well, you're never going to get that big buck. They work on their body before they work on their horns. So, um, you really got to make sure your soil prep is top notch. I always tell people, the soil samples is your blueprint. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. So that's how you got to start your food plots.
Yeah, let's go into that if we can get in more detail with the soil prep stuff. So, are you talking just, and a lot of this is out there. We're kind of starting again on the base level and kind of working our way toward more, I guess, advanced stuff. But are you just talking about, your pH, your NPK stuff? Maybe dig a little deeper into that as far as soil prep. What do you suggest there?
So I always do a soil sample. And some people are like, oh, it's just a small plot. But I mean, a small plot will fail just as quickly as a large plot will if you don't know where your soil's at. And it's pretty simple. You can do your soil samples right through your co-op, your local elevator. You can order them online from various places. Um, just go out and make sure that you do the soil sample the way they want you to do it. And then once you figure that out, that will tell you your organic matter, like you said, the NPK. If you have a lot of ferns in your area, I always say ferns, they equal a lot of lime, right? Because of nitrogen. Your pH level is going to be really low. It's going to be like 5.2, 5.5. And that is what your soil sample is going to tell you. It'll give you the amount of lime, potash, phosphorus, magnesium, all those things that are key to the plant growing. It's going to tell you how to amend that, tell you the quantities you need. And then, once that happens, you go and you pick out all your fertilizer, you throw it on the ground, and that's when you start working the dirt. You always want to work the fertilizer into the dirt. Fertilizer's got to come in contact with every grain of soil in order to neutralize it. So it's important if you can get it worked into the dirt so it's at the root base. So when it starts dissolving, it's automatic to the plant, because granules take a while. I mean, there's no magic wand. They've got to dissolve into the soil to neutralize it, around where it was put down. So, and then it's just the steps of planning after that, figuring out what you want to plant. And a lot of that depends on sunlight, and a lot of it really depends on what kind of equipment you have to work it too. Not everybody's
Yeah.
got a big John Deere tractor to do the dirt prep. So, but yeah,
Right.
the soil is definitely, get that amended, use the right fertilizers, and you'll have great success.
So so I get this test sample back, and I just sent some out here last week that I should be getting back real soon. Because mine, so for example, I have a backyard plot. I have 6.5 acres. It's challenging, but I've shot a couple of nice bucks back there in my little plot. But the challenging part is I get a lot of leaves blown in there, getting those out of there. Shade, like you said, and it's just getting and it also floods a lot in the spring right now. So right now it's flooded, and figuring all that stuff out, right? For
Yep.
my individual spot. And so it's a different challenge for every person depending on your spot. And if I could choose a different spot that wasn't so low, I would, but I can't. It's like the only spot back there. But as far as so I get this back, I get this soil sample test back. Let's say the pH is low. It typically is acidic more than on the basic end. And if people don't know, just a recap for people, 7 pH is neutral, right? And above 7's basic, below 7's acidic, and typically soils tend toward acidic. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally they do. I'd say probably 85-90% of the soils I test are usually right in the 5.8 to 6.5. And actually, 6.5 is pretty good. Anywhere from 6.2 to 7.2, you can usually get anything to grow with just some minimal amendments, a little more lime if it's calling for it. I find a lot of potash is needed. That seems to be a deficiency for some reason in Michigan when I get up north. Um, so, but like we said, the soil sample, it tells you how to do that. And there are situations like yours, right? We don't all have 200 acres and we can go and have someone clear cut a beautiful 1 acre section out in the middle. We're stuck planting a hole that gets a little wet or it gets a little shade, but there are things out there you can plant to make those areas work and be very productive for you. There's some research there, just you have to reach out and talk to people about it.
Yeah, and so the lime is going to make that more basic. So if it's a little acidic, your test is going to tell you how much lime to actually add to neutralize that, right? And then the potash, for guys that don't know, potash is fixing what for the soil?
So the potash is actually going to fix your potassium levels in
Gotcha.
your soil. So, and I find those are pretty deficient sometimes. Um, but you've got different kind of lime too. You got your pelletized lime and you got your ag lime. Pelletized lime will start working in three weeks to 30 days. But ag lime can take anywhere from a month, 3 months to start working up to 6 months. So you got to be careful of what lime you're putting down. And even if you're going to put pelletized lime down, sometimes it's better to throw it down 3 weeks to a month before you're going to plant. Maybe even work it into the dirt if you have that time and the equipment to do that. So that way it's readily available to the plant when you put it in there, instead of the plant having to wait that 2-3 weeks or for a good rain for it to start neutralizing the soil.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how long it takes. What's the lag in for both, I guess, fertilizer, but also, yeah, neutralization with like lime, for example. So it could take months, depending.
Correct. And then pelletized lime is usually filtered out, within 6 months to a year, depending on how much is down there. Ag lime stays in the soil and it can actually produce nitrogen up to 3 years, but it's more of a slow release. So, you got to pay attention to what you're putting down. Some people don't know there's a difference because a lot of people they're not doing food plots right. So there's a lot of education that can go into it to benefit how your turnout's going to be for sure.
Yeah. So typically, if I get these soil tests back here and it's, May, beginning of May, let's say, um, with my situation, a quick turnaround, I'm really shooting for maybe, I don't know, fall planting or just trying to get it straightened out. Let's say it is off in pH, straightened out for the next year even. It might not be a quick fix. Is that kind of what you're saying here? All right, if you like this episode so far, please do me a favor. First, give it a like and follow if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening somewhere on a podcast platform, please rate it and give a review and share it with a friend you think might benefit. Those really help the channel out and help it grow, and those are greatly appreciated. And here's the high IQ moment. If you're just getting started with creating food for deer on your land, I suggest thinking about the following. Do you have a comprehensive plan? A huge consideration before you start clearing plots has to do with your overall plan and setup on your land. Can you get in and out without alerting deer? Is this a destination plot you won't hunt till late season, or a kill plot you can hunt strategically all year? How does this relate to the rest of your land and overall hunting strategy for the entire season? Will this spot receive enough sunlight? And is it elevated enough to not flood in the spring? Many things need to be thought about and planned out strategically before you plant so you have ultimate success. It's not just about getting plants to grow. And getting a professional hand with that is not a bad idea either, and we do that here at Deer IQ. That's high IQ and something to think about. And I have a free resource for you which fits with this series on land and food strategies. It's the Land Management Starter Kit, which goes through the 4 big questions every landowner must ask to set up their property for success. You can download it below. That will really help you get off on the right foot or help you get back on the right track for ultimate whitetail success on your property. All right, and now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, it can be, sometimes people have to take a year, depending on how bad your soil is. I'd suggest if your soil's really bad, amend it to what they say. And maybe if your organic matter's low, perfect organic matter on a soil sample is 10. I find in Michigan a lot of times it's around 1.5 to 2.5. Um, Plant some oats, plant some buckwheat. Those two things will grow really well in almost any kind of situation, and it's a great fertilizer for your ground. It puts that green manure, we call it, back into the ground, which will help build for the next year. Put that organic matter. Organic matter is like your sponge. It's what helps retain the moisture and retain the nutrients as it's breaking down and create more nutrients. So it's really important, especially like sandy soils. Sand's a great filter. Use it in pools. So once you get a good rain, all that fertilizer you put in there is now 6 inches below your root base because it just all washed away. When you got organic matter in your soil, it holds that moisture. It'll grab that nutrients and it'll keep it at the root base. So that's pretty important.
Yeah. So let's say I plant oats and buckwheat, which I do quite a bit actually. Would your suggestion be then to just turn that in like a light tilling, or just leave that for the first year and then the next year you've got that as your base?
What I like to do, the routine I like to do is I like to put buckwheat down in the spring, and several weeks after it grows, it usually wants to start seeding. So I try to do it in June. And then just before the seed comes out on the plant, you terminate that. And buckwheat's really easy to terminate. You just roll it over with a roller. And once you break the stem, it's done for the season. It won't grow. So then you can go ahead and put oats back through there and have your oats for your winter time. Oats are really good for the deer's digestive system for the winter. It's full of carbohydrates. and it's got sugar in it, so it's super attractive. It's one of the underestimated food sources out there for whitetail. A lot of people overlook it, and I think some of it is you get them Carnage Brascas and you get 14-inch leaves and they're covering the ground and it's just, looks like tons and tons of food, to where an oak grows, one seed grows, one stem, right? So
Right.
it's not as attractive, but it is for the deer and they love it. And it is a green fertilizer. So then, you use the right oats, they have their fall food source, their late food source when all the plants are gone, the corn and the beans are all off the fields. You have something now that will grow later in the season because it grows at a lower temp, and you have something that the deer don't have anywhere else. So it's a super attractive food source and really healthy for the deer late in the season.
Yeah, good points there. Um, I have planted, like I said, quite a bit of buckwheat and oats, and I would say the buckwheat is probably the easiest thing to grow. And in the summer, I found that animals in general, but deer would just love that. And I think it's kind of an overlooked food source for a lot of locations, and um, something again easy to plant that you can terminate then, right, and then go for a fall planting.
Yep. Yep. And that's, and those two, that combination together will actually build topsoil. It will build
Yeah,
dirt. After a few years, you can actually turn that sand, but the thing is you want to try not to turn that. If you're trying to build dirt on top of sand, if you turn it every year, you're just mixing that dirt back in with the sand, bringing the sand back to the surface, and you're just kind of nullifying everything you've done. So um, it's important that if you can just scuff it up a little bit with a harrow drag, or real lightly with a disc, maybe turn your disc straight so it's not really rolling it over, but just cutting the ground up a little bit so you can make that good seed to soil contact, because that's one thing you really do need, especially if you're broadcasting any seed. You really have to have that seed to soil contact. A big mistake with these throw and grows is people, throw and grow. They tell me I can just go throw it on the ground, it's going to grow. Well, if you're out in the woods and you're throwing it down on top of a bunch of leaves, the chances of all that seed germinating is pretty minimal. You'll get some germination,
right.
but you're not going to be as happy as you thought you were by just reading the throw and grow kind of labels. So
Yeah. So you mentioned also sunlight. Talk about that a little bit. Obviously that's a major thing. How much sunlight are we looking for? Because, for example, my plot in the back, small plots, kill plots like that. A lot of times, you got trees around the edges. Uh, is there a percent or something that you should be looking for? Let's say you're putting in a plot that's woods somewhere or whatever, and I just remove some trees out of mine for several reasons. That is one of them. What are we looking for as far as sunlight to get a proper food plot established?
so it really so there's so many things out there that you don't need full sun, right? There are plants out there and there are seed blends that will grow in minimal sunlight. Buckwheat, like we just talked about, that loves sunlight. That's one thing that buckwheat does need. It doesn't care much for the soil. It'll grow in about anything, but it needs the sunlight. Now, oats will grow in filtered sunlight to where you can grow those in 2 hours to full sun. So, like in an area along the field edges, um, you get that south field edge where the sun's not really going to hit it because it's right under the trees. There are products out there that you can plant that will grow in that 2.5 hours to 2 hours sunlight, all the way to full sunlight. Um, and those are used a lot in the kill plots, like the ones that are in the woods, that you can't get a lot of equipment to. You just get back there and harrow drag with a quad or whatever.
Right.
But 4 hours of sunlight to full sunlight is what you need for your clovers and your brassicas, and which brassicas in Michigan are a lot of people's go-to. Deer hammer them. They're full of carbs. They're really attractive because they got a high sugar content in them. Once it gets cold, the whitetail love to kill them. So um, it really just depends on, you know, you got to be able to work with what you have. Like you say, not everybody's got 200 acres of property. So maybe you are planting just the trails in your woods with an oat in the fall because you're not getting the sunlight. So um, it really just depends on your situation. Every situation is different. Everybody's property is different. But around the field edges and stuff, when I do a food plot, I like to do the low light seed, the oats and the rye along the woods line, and then we can go out into the center and do clovers and brassicas, that needs the 6 hours of full sunlight to thrive.
Yeah, that's a key point. I think maybe people overlook is where you're putting stuff in a plot. If you have multiple things in a plot, and we can talk about that kind of strategy here, maybe in part two. We're going to do 2 parts here, but if you do multiple things in a plot, setting them up for the sunlight they actually need, that'd be a pretty key thing and easy to overlook as far as where you're planting what in your plot. Let's get into some more of those. Are there other big reasons or key factors that food plots fail? Like things that you see, you probably see a lot of stuff. Are there some key ones of those that just you see people doing all the time, or major ones that cause failure?
So one step that I'm finding more and more, and this was something I struggled with back in the day, and food plots can be time consuming. So a lot of people will go out and one night they'll turn the dirt over with a disc or a rototiller and come back and they want to do something with it in a day or two. Um, well, what happens when you turn that dirt is, I like to explain it, you're evaporating all the moisture out of that dirt if you don't pack it back down. So it's like if you take 2 ice cubes and you set them on the counter and you smash one ice cube, that ice cube you smash is going to evaporate way faster than that solid ice cube. That's what you're doing to your dirt when you turn it and you don't pack it back down. You're allowing all that moisture to evaporate out of that dirt, and it'll turn to a silt, or it'll turn into some real hard clumpy mess that won't cover the seed real well. Um, so now you've just really killed your germination rate because you don't have any of that moisture to start the seed, the important part of it. So I find a lot of times that people aren't packing their dirt right away. I actually drag my tiller right behind my cultipacker right behind my tiller while I'm tilling. So I'm packing the dirt right back down immediately, trapping all that moisture in there. So that way, when I go to seed it, it'll help that germination rate because it'll already have the moisture to help. Um, I find that's one of the biggest things people
Hmm.
don't realize that needs to be done. When they're doing their smaller plots.
So in that scenario, so as I disc it, and then I cultipack it, so it's pretty packed down now. As far as seeding, so now you need to get the seed. Let's say it's not just clover or something that maybe just needs contact. I need to get that down in there. So what would you use to do that? Would you just how would you break apart the soil then, or get that, I guess, depth of for the seeds in the
Yeah,
soil?
so a harrow drag works good, a chain link fence. In a situation like that with a large seed, as you pointed out a little bit there, the smaller seed doesn't need to be buried, just needs to be pressed into the dirt, make solid
Right.
contact with a firm seed bed. Like soybeans and corn, anything that needs to be under the dirt. What I like to do is I like to turn the dirt with a rototiller. I will actually broadcast my seed into that freshly turned dirt, and then I will run a harrow drag or chain link fence, whatever you have, run that over one single pass, get that dirt to cover that seed. Then I will pack it with a cultipacker or even a yard roller. I
Yeah.
started out using yard rollers and they work great. Just need to firm that seed bed back down. So
Right. And we're assuming, someone doesn't have a drill planter or something like that with this. And
yeah, I mean,
if you do, great. But
yeah, I mean, I have one, they're great. But do I use it on every job? I do not. I can't access everything with that. And sometimes when you're doing a eighth of an acre, is it really worth all that time to hook everything
mhm.
up when I can just walk around with a quad, go with a quad and turn the dirt and get it loosened up and then just broadcast it and roll it back down. And you can be super successful with that. You don't have to have all the fancy equipment. I mean, you just got to make sure you're doing the right steps, make sure your soil's,
Right.
the seed bed's good for you. So,
Yeah. So turning over the dirt too much, losing moisture, right? And I think that's one that really I think has escaped me earlier. Not I haven't thought about a lot because then you hear people talking about, oh, now we got to wait for the rain, and if you don't evaporate all that moisture, you might have a better chance of germination. And not have to
Yeah,
just pray for rain type thing, right? And
yeah.
that's good to do. Try to time it, but you can't always do that.
No, it's tough. I mean, it really is, and that's the thing. When you're working a full time job and you want to get home and do your food plot, and Mother Nature doesn't always let you get out there. It's raining,
Yeah.
or I mean, Michigan, it could snow tomorrow. Who knows? But um, yeah, but it's an important step. To try and get that done. I would suggest that if you can't do it, um, consecutively, then and you did just turn it, well, then maybe disc that dirt up again and pack it right away, so that way you can get some of that moisture back to the top and have it firm up the seed bed. Because what I find, there's two things that'll happen: it'll turn to silt, like I said, or it'll get like clay will get chunks. And once those chunks harden up in them clay balls, they're very hard to break down with a cultipacker or a yard roll or anything. So your seed to soil contact becomes a seed just laying in voids more so than actually
Mm-hmm.
being in the dirt. So um, I mean, it's kind of a big step. It doesn't sound like much, but it really does make a big difference. When I first started in my hobby days, I failed at that miserably. I'd go back out 2 days later, and now I'm just making a dust storm because everything's dry, and I'm trying to drag it
Mm-hmm.
again and trying to pack it, and silt won't pack. That stuff just pushes around, and it's really not beneficial. So, I mean, that is a very important step.
Good points. Any other fails? So that was one. Any others that you see people making?
Herbicides. You got to be careful with your selective herbicides. Some of them leave a residual in the soil. Like IMOX is a very popular herbicide that I like to use on clovers. It kills everything but clover, chicory, and alfalfa. It's ideal, but say you're going to terminate that clover patch the following year, IMOX will leave a residual in the soil that won't allow you to grow brassicas for anywhere from 9 to 18 months. Um, so that's something you got to be very careful with if you're going to be using selective herbicides. Read the label, figure out what you're going to do. Make sure what your plan is for the next couple of years, so that way you're not devastating your next season's plant. So I see that one being kind of a big deal at times.
Yeah, because if you don't realize that, then the next year you're like, well, why isn't this growing? And that might not even cross your mind. You're thinking, trying to figure out all this other stuff, and it is a herbicide that's still there.
You're right. And there's so much information out there in social media and stuff, right? That, you know, and people ask questions and people give simple answers like IMOX,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't explain the details. You really got to read the labels on all those things and make sure what you're doing. There's a Killzall out there that's a 365. That won't let anything grow for 365 days. You don't want to put that on your food plot, right? It'll kill it off really well for a year. So I've seen somebody do that too, and you can't even get buckwheat to grow in that at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, herbicides is a big one. Um, Not doing a soil sample is another big one. It really is. I get that a lot. Why wouldn't this grow? What'd your soil tell you? What was your pH level? What was your organic matter? I didn't do a soil sample. I just threw X amount of lime and X amount of triple 19 down. And they don't know if they burned their crops out or if they didn't have enough to establish, because they didn't know
Uh-huh.
where they were at. So that's another big one.
Yeah, because if you don't know where you started from a baseline, then you have so many variables going on, you can't even start eliminating anything as
Right.
your culprit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like a mechanic doesn't like take too many swings at a car that's not running right because he never really figures out what fixed it. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
wants to make sure that he's going through and doing it detail by detail.
Yep,
So, and your soil samples are pretty inexpensive to do. So, I mean, just go to the co-op and get them. They're what, 15, $20, something like that. So they're worth it.
for sure. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap up part one here. We've talked about some basics to hopefully get a food plot started correctly or to fix a food plot if you're struggling with that. Before we go here, tell us a little bit about, and people that are listening here, just about where they can find you and your stuff. You have a lot of stuff, and we can talk maybe more in part 2 about some specifics, but Killer Food Plots and just kind of, I guess, what you have there and where they can find it maybe.
So you can go to killerfoodplots.com. That's our website. Family Farm and Home has our seed too. Some mom and pop shops around my area. Shag's Great Outdoors. We have 11 different seed blends. Again, as I was saying, we have seed blends that'll grow in 2 hours to full sunlight. So that's very important for those hidden corners or those wood plots. We're a full install. We install all summer long. Turnkey install, I like to say. We do everything from killing the plots off to walking away and having you hunt out of them that fall. So, the best way to get a hold of us is right through our website on killerfoodplots.com. Check out, we got tons of informational videos on there, ground prep, what's in our seeds, what they do for the health of the deer, just all sorts of things on there. So just check us out there and get a hold of us.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rich, for coming on.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. Think about your food sources on your land and your weak spots in your plots, and how you will either figure out your weak spots if you don't know them yet, or if you know them, fix them in the simplest manner possible. Again, you don't absolutely need a bunch of equipment to do a good job. It's about doing the right things, not the most expensive things. Next time, we'll get into more details for making killer plots to draw the best deer around with Rich. You won't want to miss that, and I'll see you then.